John Lee holds a campaign rally 2 days before the CE election. 324 new COVID-19 cases in the city, and the hospital authority resumes its special visiting arrangement at 26 hospitals.
Good evening and welcome. Chief Executive Election candidate John Lee said he will make the city a hopeful place together with the people of Hong Kong.
This as he held a campaign rally this afternoon attended by more than 1,400 political heavyweights and election committee members. Just 2 days before the chief executive election, John Lee held the campaign rally at the Convention and Exhibition Centre, displaying the slogan, "We and Us, a New Chapter Together." 6 representatives were invited to speak on stage, including a secondary school student, former Police Commissioner Tan King Shing, and a friend who's known John Lee for 25 years.
I particularly appreciate his emphasis on unity, integration, and togetherness, calling on people of different ethnicities in Hong Kong to join hands and start a new chapter.
Also on stage was Olympic Games table tennis player Du Hoi Kim and renowned surgeon Lo Chung Mao.
With the onset of the epidemic, we understand that there are shortfalls in our healthcare system. I would expect that within the healthcare sector, we would also have to look after the well-being and interests of our profession, patients' interests.
And former Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying.
We have to work together and sacrifice our own interests in order to contribute to the bigger interests of the society and of the country. I am very confident in the future of Hong Kong.
Then John Lee laid out his visions of the city's future under his very likely leadership.
If I'm elected, I will bring to you a government that can work and be able to achieve. Wisdom is in the community, and therefore we would not be relying on 1 or 2 individuals. We should not be relying on the government alone to work.
Others who came to support John Lee include property tycoons Victor Lee and Gordon Wu, political heavyweights Maria Tam and Henry Tang.
I hope he will implement many of those policies, whether it is on the pandemic, whether it's on the opening up of the borders with the mainland, and also on the livelihood issues, as well as on the art and culture.
Meanwhile, sources say there are about 100 election committee members who are heading back home from the mainland to cast their ballots. Under the Return to Hong Kong scheme, Hong Kongers are not subject to quarantine, but they must isolate for 2 weeks when they return to the mainland.
The city logged 324 COVID infections today. All but 29 were locally acquired.
Meanwhile, from today, family members can once again visit hospitalized patients under the Hospital Authority's special visiting arrangement. Christy Khan reports.
Hong Kong's daily COVID tally has remained around the 300 mark for the 3rd consecutive day. Among the confirmed cases, 144 were screened by PCR tests and 180 were identified by rapid antigen tests. 23 positive cases were detected in schools. Among them were 15 students and 8 school staff members. The authorities said there was no epidemiological link between the latest school infections. Additionally, 6 more COVID patients aged between 74 and 93 died at public hospitals yesterday. The authorities meanwhile said COVID-recovered patients from overseas are still required to undergo 1 week of quarantine upon their arrival.
We will make a risk assessment. We'll find out what his CT value is, whether this is a repositive case, and if we suspect that it's a repositive case, we would allow him to go to the quarantine hotel for isolation.
Starting today, family members are once again allowed to visit hospitalized patients under the HA's special visiting arrangement. This man said this was his first time visiting his wife in 4 months, adding they couldn't stop crying during the long overdue reunion. Under the arrangement, family members are required to register prior to the visit. Each registered individual will be allowed to visit the patient once or twice per week. Each section can last for a maximum of 1 hour. Furthermore, long queues could be seen outside various post offices. That's as people who had received their COVID jabs overseas were trying to obtain a QR code and update their vaccination records. In order to facilitate the implementation of the third stage of the vaccine pass by the end of May, the government said they will increase the manpower of the 18 post offices designated to process up to 3,000 vaccine update applications each day from next week. The authorities added they will reintroduce the online platform for people to register their vaccination records soon to ease the pressure on the service. Christy Khan, TVB News.
The Olympic Council of Asia said today the Asian Games, scheduled to take place in September in Hangzhou, will be postponed until next year. This as the mainland reported 4,628 new COVID-19 cases, most of them in Shanghai. On Thursday, Shanghai registered 4,200 new cases, most of them asymptomatic. 12 more people died, with only one of them having been vaccinated. Local authorities said 7 of the city's districts and part of Pudong have been classified zero COVID. While the risk of transmission within the community is minimal, medical experts fear the possibility of a rebound. Meanwhile, Beijing reported 55 confirmed cases, while Guangzhou reported 14 infections. Taiwan logged 36,168 local infections, another daily record high, and 10 more deaths.
Meanwhile, Japan could experiment with opening its borders to a small group of vaccinated foreign tourists later this month. According to Fuji News Network, visitors must have undergone 3 COVID vaccination jabs and be part of a package tour with a fixed itinerary. The program will be expanded if there is no further spread of infections. The report came a day after Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said in London that he planned to relax border restrictions in line with wealthy democracies from June. Meanwhile, South Korea reported slightly over 26,700 new COVID-19 cases yesterday. The daily caseload was down from the previous day's figure of about 42,300. Health authorities say the daily tally has recently been on the decline. However, the country detected its first Omicron subvariant case of BA.2.12.1 this week. That was from a woman in her 50s who arrived from the United States.
Another attempt is being made to evacuate scores of civilians trapped in a heavily bombed steelworks in the Ukrainian city of Mariupol.
Ukraine says Russian forces are trying to finish off the city's last defenders and complete the capture of the strategically vital port.
The sprawling Azovstal steel plant is the last part of the city still in the hands of an estimated 2,000 Ukrainian fighters. An estimated 200 civilians remain trapped underground with little food or water. Ukrainian officials say efforts continue to get people out. UN brokered evacuations of some of the hundreds of civilians who had taken shelter at the plant began last weekend, but were halted in recent days by renewed fighting. The Kremlin denies Ukrainian allegations that Russian troops stormed the plant. It said humanitarian corridors are in place, but reiterated calls for Ukrainian forces inside to disarm. Elsewhere, displaced people continue to stream into Ukrainian-held territory in search of assistance. Aid worker Irina Chorna estimates that 80% of the region is now occupied by Russian forces.
It is very difficult for us because we are very close to the war, and we're doing all that we can every day. All of us, we're doing what we can, but we need support. Please help us.
10 weeks into the devastating war, Ukraine's military claims it recaptured some areas in the south and repelled other attacks in the east. Ukrainian officials have warned that Russian President Vladimir Putin wants to present Russians with a major battlefield success or announce an escalation of the war in time for Victory Day commemorations on Monday. But the head of Britain's armed forces said that while Putin appears to be trying to rush to a tactical victory, Russian forces are struggling to gain momentum in the Donbass.
Ukraine has received pledges for an additional $6.5 billion in humanitarian aid at an international donors conference in Warsaw. The money raised at the event hosted by Poland and Sweden will be aimed at rebuilding Ukraine following the war. The pledges came from countries and businesses. A one-day meeting included representatives from the United Nations and companies such as Google. Swedish Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson said the sum exceeded expectations. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said investment and reforms are needed to rebuild Ukraine and help pave its way into the EU. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has met with his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida for diplomatic talks at number 10 Downing Street on Thursday. The pair agreed to strengthen military cooperation.
Kishida arrived in London following a visit to Southeast Asia, where he had hoped to drum up support for sanctions against Russia over Ukraine. The Japanese leader also warned the invasion of Ukraine could be replicated in East Asia. Dan Orell tells us more.
London and Tokyo agreed to heighten cooperation in various areas after Fumio Kishida made his first official visit to the UK as Japanese Prime Minister. Kishida was hosted in number 10 Downing Street by Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson after being welcomed in the British capital by a Royal Air Force overflight.
The UK and Japan have an amazingly close friendship and partnership. Two island monarchies, two democracies that have shared for a long time a view of the world.
The pair announced that the militaries of Britain and Japan will work more closely together under a new defence deal. The agreement will facilitate the deployment of the two Group of 7 countries' armed forces for joint training and exercises, as well as disaster relief. Johnson highlighted the strong stance Japan has taken against Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Tokyo has condemned Moscow's military actions and imposed sanctions on the Kremlin alongside many Western nations. Following the meeting, Kishida said 140 more Russians would be added to a Japanese asset freeze list. He said an export ban will be expanded to incorporate Russian military firms. The Prime Minister stated that democracies around the world need to stand in unity against what they called authoritarian regimes. They also drew parallels with the security situation in Asia. We must collaborate with our allies and like-minded countries and never tolerate a unilateral attempt to change the status quo by the use of force, said Kishida. Peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait is critical not only for Japan's security, but also for the stability of the international community, he added. In Beijing, the Foreign Ministry today accused Japan of exaggerating a perceived threat from China as an excuse to boost its own military might. An official spokesman, Zhao Lijian, said if Japan really wanted peace and stability in East Asia, it should immediately stop provoking confrontation between big powers. Dan Orell, TVB News.
Vote counting is underway in the UK's local elections after a campaign focusing on surging food and fuel prices, sparked in part by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The ballot will decide the makeup of more than 200 local councils nationwide. It is also widely considered to be an important gauge of public sentiment ahead of the next general election, which must take place by 2024. In a blow to Conservative Prime Minister Boris Johnson, the opposition Labour Party made big gains in London. They won control of Wandsworth, Barnet and Westminster, 3 traditionally Tory boroughs. This comes with Johnson facing mounting scrutiny after being fined by police for attending a gathering during the UK's 2020 pandemic lockdown. He's also facing a parliamentary investigation into whether he misled lawmakers about the incident. Voters for the rest of England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have yet to be fully counted. In Northern Ireland, voters are electing a new 90-seat assembly. Polls are suggesting that Irish Nationalist Party Sinn Féin could win the largest number of seats and the post of First Minister. Sinn Féin has never held the post before. Still ahead on tonight's news. Farewell to 12-car trains running on the East Rail line. A Home Affairs Department official arrested in connection with a police crackdown on a prostitution syndicate. And the U.S. Senate to vote on legislation that would codify abortion rights into federal law.
Welcome back to TVB News. The police have arrested 5 people on suspicion of operating a prostitution syndicate, including a Home Affairs Department official. 4 men and 1 woman aged between 27 and 43 were arrested on suspicion of control over persons for the purpose of prostitution, living on earnings of prostitution, and permitting premises to be used for prostitution. Among the arrestees, James Lam, an assistant district officer at the Heighten district office, was released on bail but has to report to the police in mid-May. The police said the syndicate has been in operation for around 2 years via a Telegram messaging group, and their preliminary investigations show that Lam was involved in booking hotel rooms for the syndicate.
Police arrested a 27-year-old man on Tuesday in relation to suspicious push notifications delivered from the TVB News app. The suspect is an employee of Television Broadcasts Limited. Authorities say the man was charged on suspicion of access to a computer with criminal or dishonest intent. He was granted bail and must report to the police in mid-May. This comes after the TVB News app delivered 23 push notifications in a row with strange contents within 21 minutes early on Tuesday. On the same day, officers from the Cybersecurity and Technology Crime Unit carried out investigations in the IT office at TVB City. TVB stated it will fully cooperate with the police and reinforce the company's monitoring systems to prevent similar incidents from happening. China's Vice President Wang Qishan is planning to attend the inauguration of South Korean President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol next Tuesday. That is according to an announcement by Yoon's team. Wang's attendance comes after Yoon vowed to strengthen South Korea's alliance with the United States. This amid growing nuclear and missile threats from North Korea. The United States is sending Second Gentleman Douglas Emhoff as the head of its delegation to this ceremony. President Joe Biden plans to visit Seoul for the following week for talks with Yoon. From Japan, former Prime Minister Yukio Haruoyama will attend the inauguration. Tokyo is also expected to send a minister-level official, but details have yet to be confirmed.
The U.S. Senate will vote next week on legislation that would codify abortion rights into federal law. Democrats are mounting their response to the Supreme Court's leaked draft decision that would overturn the landmark Roe v. Wade ruling. The procedural vote set for Wednesday will mostly be symbolic, as Democrats do not have the necessary 60 votes to overcome a Republican filibuster and move ahead with the bill. That means the effort is almost certain to fail. Both parties are dealing with the political fallout from the leaked draft that would overturn a 1973 ruling that legalized abortion nationwide. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said members of both parties need to go on record about where they stand. The Bank of England raised its base interest rate by 0.25 points. At one point, the Hong Kong dollar was trading $9.70 against the British pound, reaching a 2-year low. The Bank of England's move aims to tackle soaring inflation that's hit a 30-year high. The move has led to an increase in the number of inquiries in the city regarding studying in Britain. Education consultant Samuel Chan said the exchange rates mean tuition fees for Hong Kong students in the UK are now 10% lower. He said the increase could also have a positive impact on living costs, adding more people have shown an interest in purchasing property in Britain. Today, Hong Kong bid farewell to a 40-year-old train that served the MTR's East Rail Line.
Railway enthusiasts from across the city boarded the train this afternoon for its final journey. Timothy Lee tells us more.
At 1 this afternoon, the mid-life refurbishment train began its last ride from Hong Kong to Heighten. A huge crowd of railway fans flocked to the locomotive to take photos and witness the historical moment. To celebrate the special occasion, the MTR broadcasted the detailed history of the MLR train over the course of its 4 decades-long service. But as all good things come to an end, the nostalgic ride reached its final destination in Heighten in just 20 minutes. The history of the MLR train can be traced back to the Kowloon Canton Railway. From its humble beginnings of only serving 7 stations, KCR gradually expanded and modernized over the years, becoming powered by electricity in 1982. This train enthusiast said he is emotional about the retirement of the MLR train, as the train was part of his childhood. Nicknamed the fly-headed train, the MLR trains are set to be completely decommissioned before the launch of the MTR's upcoming Heighten to Central Link on May 15th. As the platforms of the new Admiralty and Exhibition Center stations are shorter, the East Rail Line began switching from the 12-car MLR trains to 9-car trains early last year. But this MLR train fan said the new designs lack a traditional flavor and hopes the retired train will have a place in the city's museums. The MTR said it will donate parts of the train, such as its seats, for educational purposes, and will explore options for preserving the train cars. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
That's the news. Thanks for watching.
Good night.